I've been literally waiting for this book for forever. Hey guys, Heidi here. Today I'm going to be doing a book review on the Final Gambit, the last book in the Inheritance series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I absolutely had to have this book the day it came out. My husband actually works next to a Barnes & Noble, so I told him, I said, after you get off, stop by, go pick up my book, because I needed it. So yeah, just to do a quick little intro of what this video is going to entail, I'm going to do a quick recap of the rest of the Inheritance Games series, so obviously the Inheritance Games and the Hawthorne Legacy. I'm going to go over what I liked, what I disliked, and there will definitely be spoilers, so be warned. If you haven't even started the series, I'm recapping them. It's going to be quick recaps, not anything too serious, but there will be spoilers. So I reviewed the Inheritance Games and the Hawthorne Legacy on my blog, and the first thing that I described this as was a mixture of Knives Out, the movie, The Princess Diaries, and Truly Devious, if you've read that mystery series by Maureen Johnson. Oh my gosh, it was like a mixture of all three, and it was a perfect mixture, and it was really, really great. It was interesting. It was so different from things that I had been reading at the time. And I honestly don't know what attracted me to this novel in the first place. Maybe, you know, the beautiful cover, because it's obviously gorgeous. But I picked this up, I read it, I was like, wow, please continue. And I know I over-exaggerated a little bit with how long I waited, because I do see now that it was way less time than I thought it was. Barely had to wait 6 months for the next book for most of these, so I'm very thankful for that. So anyway, the Inheritance Game starts out with Avery Kylie Grams. She is a waitress living with her sister Libby, her half-sister, and she gets a call to go to Texas because she has been named in the will of Tobias Hawthorne. He is a famous billionaire, and Avery has no idea what she's doing, but she goes anyway. So when she gets there, she thinks that she's going to maybe inherit a few $1,000s, but she actually inherits the whole entire fortune, which is where the Princess Diaries comes in, because, oh my gosh, the going tour the closets, the actual house, it was very Princess Diaries. And it was so cool to just see that in a not as light-hearted tone, because this did have a little darker elements to it than obviously the Princess Diaries did. In order for Avery to inherit the fortune, she has to live in a Hawthorne house for 1 year, and she's not allowed to leave. I think she can leave for like 3 days, or no more than 3 days. Might be no more than 24 hours, I'm not sure. But those are the stipulations for her to keep the inheritance. So once Avery learns that she is the heiress of this huge fortune, she gets to deal with all of the family members who feel like they were cheated because they didn't inherit the fortune. She basically goes on a journey. She learns about all of the Hawthorns, especially Grayson and Jameson, the two love interests for Avery. And in the process of that, she learns more about the Hawthorne family and their history. What she discovers, though, is that Tobias Hawthorne's son, Toby, went missing after a fire. I don't know how many years ago it was, 20 years ago. He was presumed dead because all of his friends were found dead after the fire. So they go on, she teams up with Jameson and she teams up with Grayson, and they find clues about Toby, and Tobias left them a game, basically, to play throughout this book. The main thing that we get from the Inheritance Game is an introduction to the characters and their world, and obviously the Hawthorne family and this huge legacy that they built. You get that. You get, obviously, the death threats for Avery since she's inheriting these billions. And what basically happens is, after they do all this sleuthing, someone tries to kill Avery, and they find out that it is Sky, Grayson and Jameson's mom. So they kick her out after they figure out that she tried to kill Avery. And then they get to the end riddle of this novel, and they actually find out that Toby is still alive, and Toby was Harry, who Avery used to play chess with before she got the call from Tobias Hawthorne's estate. So that's basically the inheritance games in a nutshell. It was a very quick summary just to kind of remind everybody where we were with that. I was always Team Jameson, but I do love Grayson. I'm going to have to get into this later because this is going to turn into a whole debate. Okay, so the Hawthorne Legacy. This book starts 1 week after the inheritance games finishes. You get a little more romance in this book than you did the first one, I feel like, but you also get a lot of more plot lines and subplot lines that you wonder how she's going to tie up. So you get to meet Max, which is really, really awesome because I love Max and I love her non-cursing language. I think it's hilarious. And you also get to see all of the same characters that you saw in the inheritance game, like Nash, the oldest Hawthorne brother, Xander, the youngest Hawthorne brother, and of course Grayson and Jameson. With this, Avery is closer to finding out more about the Hawthorns and how she ties into this whole entire game, because all she got from Tobias was "I'm sorry," which was kind of disappointing if I'm being honest, but it'll make sense later on. But with this, you find a lot more about Toby in particular. At the end of the inheritance game, you find out that Toby is alive, and he was actually Harry, who Avery knew very well and thought was a homeless man who she played chess with. Well, in the Hawthorne Legacy, basically more attempts on Avery's life are made, obviously, because she's about to inherit billions. But she discovers that Toby had a secret, and it was basically the whole entire reason he left Hawthorne House. Of course, it had to do with the fire that was started on Hawthorne Island, where he accidentally killed a lot of his friends. And Avery learns that he was romantically involved with her mother, Hannah. Avery starts to think that Toby is her father, which would get really awkward if I'm being honest, because I love Jameson and I want her to be with Jameson. And if Toby's a Hawthorne, then she and Avery's a Hawthorne, then she and Jameson can't be together, because that's weird. Anyway, so she goes on to learn more about Toby and the secrets that he kept from everyone, and they find Toby's wing. And it's really weird, and he has basically a journal on the walls, and he quotes William Blake and a poem from William Blake. But other things that you learn, basically Rebecca's mother is Toby's mother. That brings up a whole other ordeal, because Toby's not actually a Hawthorne. And it actually comes into play a lot in the Final Gambit, but I'll get into that more. So Grayson finds his biological father in the Hawthorne Legacy, and Avery actually gets kidnapped by him. And this is like the end thing that's happening, and Sheffield Grayson actually gets killed. Toby leaves Hawthorne House and lets Avery know that he is not her father, but he treats her like a daughter. And it was him who signed her birth certificate. And she basically chooses Jameson, which I am all here for, because I love Jameson. I don't know how many times I've said that. So yes, that is basically the end of the Hawthorne Legacy. The Final Gambit comes next. Alright, so the Final Gambit. Here we are, the end, all, be all of the Inheritance games. I started this a day ago, and I just finished a few hours ago. I would have finished sooner, but it's kind of hard to read with a full-time job. But honestly, this was everything I was hoping it would be. I was feeling a little disappointed in the beginning of the book, and towards the middle it did feel like it got slow to me, but there were so many loose ends that got tied up in this novel that made me so happy. I'm not going to get into the spoilers yet, so don't worry about that. I'll let you know before I get into the spoilers for this, because I have so much to talk about. But just to give you an idea of what I loved non-spoiler wise, obviously I love her writing. I wouldn't have kept up with the series the way that I did if I didn't like Jennifer Lynn Barnes' writing. The characters are still amazing. Xander is probably the comic relief that we all need in our lives. And he's so sweet and innocent, and he's just lovable, and we need Xander. And of course, you have Max back, which is amazing. You have Libby, Nash, all of your favorite characters. You don't see a lot of Thea and you don't see a lot of Rebecca. So I remember seeing them a little more in the Hawthorne Legacy than I feel like we saw them in the Final Gambit. And some other characters that you're not going to be happy about that you really don't see a lot of. Grayson is not in this book as much as in the Hawthorne Legacy, which makes sense to me because at the end of the Hawthorne Legacy, Avery basically chose Jameson. So there's no really love triangle issues as much in this book, which I thought was a relief. You get a little tired of it, to be honest. You just kind of want people to be happy. And then, of course, you learn a little more about Toby and Tobias Hawthorne. Tobias Hawthorne especially. There's one last game, of course. And I was very, very, very satisfied with the ending. The ending is probably what bumped it up to a 5-star rating for me because I was at 4 stars and I was like, okay, this is going to be a 4-star book. 4 stars, solid 4 stars. I think the other 2 I rated 5 stars, no problem. But then when we got to the ending, when I got to the ending and I was listening to it and I was reading it, I was like, okay, 5 stars. Definitely the ending made it. And I know a lot of people are actually upset with the ending, but I really, really enjoyed it. With that being said, it does not tie up in a pretty little bow. There are a few things that are kind of disappointing, but it makes it more realistic because obviously real life doesn't end perfectly. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get into the spoilers because I have so much to talk about and I don't want this video to take forever. Okay, to start with the spoilers, main thing for me, is that she does end up with Jameson in the end. And that is huge because I always rooted for Jameson. I really did. But I really loved Grayson. I loved his character. I loved his broodiness and his dark and tortured, character. I'm drawn to characters like that. But I felt like Avery could have been happy with either one of them. Her choosing Jameson and sticking with that and not going back and forth between the brothers just made me that much more content with this book, because if she would have gone back and forth between the brothers, I would have felt like she was just Emily and she was toying with them, and it would have hurt because Grayson didn't deserve that, Jameson didn't deserve that, and it was amazing to see that Avery chose Jameson, stuck with Jameson, loved Jameson, and they love each other. That was amazing. For this book, the main thing that happens is Eve, Toby's biological daughter, comes to the Hawthorne house and says Toby has been abducted. Eve falls right into the group automatically. She's super chill. Grayson gets very attached to her because she looks so much like Emily. And Avery and Jameson just kind of go on and do their own thing. And then Eve and Grayson split up and do their own thing with the mysteries and the riddles and everything. What happens after that is that Tobias Hawthorne left stipulations for his law firm that if Avery were to ever meet Eve, then she would get this last puzzle, this last riddle, which was great for Avery because Avery always felt like an imposter. She felt that it should have been Eve who was chosen to inherit the fortune. So she really felt validated in her position when she found out that Tobias knew about Eve. With that being said, the whole thing for this book, going through the whole entire book, was basically trying to rescue Toby and finish that last final puzzle from Tobias. What you get from that is a few things. So, one, you find out that Toby left not only because the fire, but because of the dark secrets that Tobias Hawthorne had. The main dark secret is what brought Eve to Hawthorne House. And Eve is an imposter in herself. She was actually teamed up with Vincent Blake, who, this is a whole thing, so if you haven't read the book, these are the major spoilers. Major spoilers. And it won't make sense unless you've read the book because there's so many different threads that you have to tie together that even though I'm spoiling it for you, you'd be like, what the heck? What does that even mean? Anyway, so Vincent Blake is actually someone who used to be the boss of Tobias Hawthorne before Tobias Hawthorne got his fortune. Tobias Hawthorne won against Vincent Blake and eventually made his fortune from that. The group originally thought that Blake was coming after Avery because he felt cheated that Tobias built the fortune. But the thing that they find out after Avery cracks Tobias's last game is that Vincent is a man of honor, and if you beat him fair and square, he will not come back for you. With that, Vincent Blake had a son named Will Blake. This was so confusing for me because when they tied up all the strings, they're like, oh yeah, his name was actually Liam. They called him Liam. I'm like, why would Liam be a nickname for Will? And then I sat there probably for 5 minutes. I stopped reading and I was thinking about it. I'm like, oh, Will Liam. And it was kind of an epiphany moment. I thought it was stupid, but that it took me so long to actually guess that. But here we are. With that, Liam had actually come to Hawthorne House expecting to get something from Tobias Hawthorne because he knew his dad was cheated from Tobias Hawthorne. Liam ended up sleeping with Rebecca's mom and telling Rebecca's mom that she loved her, and that produced Toby. And so Toby is actually a Blake and not a Hawthorne. Toby is Eve's father, which, like I said, it gets so confusing if you haven't read the book because there are so many different threads to it. You find out that because Liam was just trying to play Rebecca's mom and get into the Hawthorne house, he actually ended up getting murdered by Rebecca's mom and Tobias Hawthorne in a weird way that you'd have to read. But anyway, so Vincent, the whole reason he kidnapped Toby and he sent Eve to Hawthorne House to get on the inn is because he wanted to know the truth about what happened to his son. And he felt that Tobias did something sinister, which obviously he did. So the last puzzle for Avery was finding Will / Liam's body. That is the secret that Toby knew, which is part of the reason why he left Hawthorne House. Very confusing if you aren't paying attention in the book and you're just kind of like going through it really quickly. I had to go back and reread a couple times. I was like, wait, what's going on? It all made sense in the end. So Avery gets to Vincent Blake's ranch and she challenges him to a chess match. And Vincent makes her play chess against Toby and Eve, and they all have different things that they can win or lose if they win or lose 1 to 2 times. Avery ends up winning against Toby, but then throwing the game against Eve because she has a very risky gamble in mind to trap Vincent. So she lets Vincent see her as an innocent, not quick-witted girl, so she's not seen as a threat. And that's one of the things that Tobias Hawthorne left her in his final message. So when she throws the game with Eve and Vincent sees that, he doesn't mind taking another gamble with her and playing chess against her because he thinks that she's going to lose, when she actually wins and beats him. So that ties up all of that. Vincent leaves them alone. He will not come after him anymore. She keeps her fortune. She gets Grayson back. But the thing that doesn't tie the ending up in a sweet little nice bow is that Vincent keeps Toby because Toby lost both of his chess games. While I feel really bad for Toby, it makes sense why Jennifer Lynn Barnes did this because not everything can be perfect. And it wouldn't make sense for Toby to go back to Hawthorne House after everything that had happened there. Obviously, there's the angst between Jameson and Grayson, and if Avery really loves Jameson, Jameson questions that because he thinks that she still has feelings for Grayson, which is true to an extent, but she always chooses Jameson. And I love that. I loved their little relationship throughout the book. It was amazing seeing Jameson and Avery get to interact and become more of a couple. And then the ending, which is so controversial, and people are like, oh, I don't know if I like this. This is actually kind of ruins it for me. I thought was amazing. Spoiler alerts for Squid Games, I know completely random, but I want to compare it with something. The Final Gambit's ending reminds me so much of Squid Games on Netflix because of the way that they dealt with the money. And the money, the whole thing that Avery said the whole entire time was that you don't, once you get to a certain point, you don't do it for the money. You do it for the power. And so when Avery gave away 94% of her whole entire fortune, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. She's giving away the power. She's finally getting rid of all of those horrible things that Tobias did to get to where he was. So in my mind, it felt like she was getting, not necessarily getting rid of the bad things that he did, but in a way making them not on her. Because if she kept the whole fortune, then all of those bad things come back to her, because she is the one who is using the power that he gained from doing evil things. And in turn, that also gets rid of all of the expectations and the hardships that the Hawthorne brothers had to go to because of their grandfather. So with Avery giving all of this money away to charity, even though she really did keep a huge chunk for herself, so I don't know why people are freaking out, and she kept the Hawthorne house. She kept almost everything the same, but she got rid of the power, which was so great. And the reason this ties into Squid Games, long story short, is that in Squid Games, at the very end, if you didn't watch it, this is a spoiler, so don't listen. But at the very end of Squid Games, instead of doing something evil to keep all of the money, he turns away from it all. He turns away from the power. He turns away from the money. And it's so refreshing to see that in stories, that you don't need that power. You don't need that money because you are a better person without it. Because doing the things that you would have needed to do to keep it would have made you not as good of a person, if that makes sense. But anyway, yes, so the ending. I was so happy with it. The Hawthorne brothers finally got to do something that didn't hold them to the standards of a Hawthorne. They finally got to do what they wanted, not, oh, hone your skills in this, choose a skill, do this, win this game. And it was so great because I felt like it just all made sense. And I was so happy that Avery did that, because that feels like something that's just right for the story. If you're upset about it, I'm sorry. I really love that ending, and I love that she ended up with Jameson. I am sorry for all of the people who wanted her to end up with Grayson. Like I said, I think she could have ended up with either of them and been happy, but she chose Jameson and she stuck with that, and that's what matters, is that she stuck with Jameson and she chose him, and that's what love's about, if we're being honest. It's about choosing that person over and over and over again, even when you may have feelings for someone else, because love is hard work. And she loved Jameson and she wanted to be with Jameson, so she put the work into the relationship with Jameson, and that's what mattered to me. And I love them, and they're just so cute. And yeah, that's how I feel. One of the things that kind of made me upset about the Final Gambit was that it was a little predictable at points. It was easy to tell that Eve was not who she was saying she was, even though she was Toby's daughter. It was the fact that she was being manipulative, and you could tell that kind of from the very beginning. So that was kind of depressing that you could guess that. But otherwise, I loved all of the puzzles that they did. I loved the riddles, even though I could never guess riddles. Riddles are not my thing. I can do puzzles. I can't do riddles. But other than that, other than a few things being predictable in the middle and a little bit of the beginning being a little slow, I enjoyed everything about this book. Like I said, bumped the ending, bumped it up to 5 stars, and I am very happy to put this series on my bookshelves, and I'm happy. I can put this away and say that I feel satisfied with the way that it ended and the way that it began and the way that it was in the middle. What did you think of the Final Gambit? Let me know what was your favorite part, if you actually liked the ending, if you actually liked who she ended up with, because I love Jameson. If you wanted her to end up with Grayson, that's fine. Tell me in the comments. Also, I am curious to see which of the 3 books you think is the best. And it might be the first one, because the first one in the series is always amazing. And it could be the middle one, and it could be the last one. But I would love to hear what you think about my video, the Final Gambit, and the Inheritance games in particular, in the comments. If you enjoyed my video, go ahead and subscribe. I love to make videos about book reviews. If a movie comes out for a book, I do book versus movie reviews, and I do all kinds of videos like that. So go ahead and subscribe if you liked my videos, and let me know all of your thoughts for the whole entire series in the comments below. Bye.